Welcome back to Greenlight Studio. I'm Luke from Greenlight Studio, and with the release of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, we now have 13 movies directed by Christopher Nolan, and I'm going to be ranking them all today from worst to best. Now, to give you some context, I'm not a huge Nolan fan. I think he's one of the most overglazed and overrated directors of all time, and probably the most pseudo-intellectual filmmaker ever. But, you know what? He's got some hits. I just want to clarify, there's going to be some hot takes, there's going to be some controversy. With that in mind, leave your ranking down in the comments below. With that said, at number 13, the worst Christopher Nolan movie, in my opinion, and probably to nobody's surprise, is The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises. Now, this movie, yes, it has its fans, but I feel like all of the complaints have been said about this movie many a time. Like, I have my problems with The Dark Knight. We'll get to that sooner. But I think this has all of the problems of The Dark Knight, except worse, and without the highs that The Dark Knight has. It's just kind of goofy. I think Bane gives kind of a goofy performance. And obviously that one death scene is really, really funny. And there's just a lot of like plot gaps and plot conveniences and just overall like a really corny I'm 14 and this is deep movie with a dumb ending that wanted to have its cake and eat it too. We all know what The Dark Knight Rises is. It's kind of bad. It's not an awful movie. I don't think Nolan has an awful movie, but like it's just Dark Knight Rises. It's just kind of bad. All right, at number 12, I have Dunkirk. This movie I don't have much to say about just because this movie is kind of a nothing burger. Yes, this looks really good. And some of the things that they do with the camera are really impressive here. Obviously, Nolan knows what he's doing technically with the camera, in front of the camera. And that's a reoccurring theme that you'll see in this video. But these characters are just doing absolutely nothing. I couldn't tell you a single thing about any one of these characters. And for that reason, you just can't care about anything that's going on. So it's a pretty by-the-numbers war movie with not much to offer except some good visuals. All right, at number 11, I have Tenet. Now, this is a movie that people are very, very mixed on, and I also fall somewhere in the middle. I think that is just confusing for confusing's sake. A lot of people say that Nolan's films are way too confusing. This is the only one that I think actually is too confusing and actually difficult to follow because all of it is just over-explaining stuff, and I've heard people say that watching Nolan is like watching math on screen, and this is probably the best example of that. This movie has, I guess, a couple of cool action scenes, and that's really it. Again, just like Dunkirk, not a single character to really latch onto. I mean, the main character's name is literally protagonist. It is just a lame, dull movie. My number 10 is Insomnia. This might be the least talked about of Nolan's entire career, and I think that's a good reason for that. This is his only directed by hire movie. You know, this came right after Memento, so he was hired to direct Insomnia, which has a great two leads. I mean, seeing Robin Williams in this is kind of crazy, just in a really odd role for him. Honestly, for such great actors, they're not given much to do with their performance. This is a very basic thriller that it's in one ear out the other. Like, I think after a couple days, I already forgot everything that happened in this movie. It's just kind of a basic nothing burger movie. It's fine, but nothing special. Here's where we get into some controversy because my number 9 is actually the newest film on this list, and that is The Odyssey. Now, we have a full review on our channel for this movie, so you should check that out if you want our full in-depth thoughts. But I think that this movie is really, really flawed, despite being technically immaculate. I was genuinely in awe with some of these shots and what they pulled off in this movie. I cannot believe that they did it. But that is really the only thing I felt during this movie. Besides that, I felt almost nothing. There's one scene at the end where there's a flashback that kind of involves Zendaya's character, and that is that's the emotional core of this film, but it's too little too late. I think that the dialogue is just bad. I think that the character work is not great, and this is overly long for what it is. Like, I think that there's I think the best version of an adaptation of the story is going to be a very long movie, maybe 3 hours, but I think that this movie needed to cut all the side quests and Nolan fluff and instead expand these characters and make it so that you can connect with these characters, but it just doesn't give you anything to connect with. It's a movie that is somehow dull despite all of the immaculate things that are happening in front of the camera. The only character with any kind of layers is the main character, Odysseus, and even then, I feel like those things that are hinted at are not shown nearly enough. And on top of that, while I said this is technically immaculate, the one technical thing that is kind of bad is the editing. So I think that there is a really good movie in here somewhere if you just rearrange some things, restructure some things, better editing, but unfortunately this movie just kind of fell flat for me. All right, number 8. From this place onward, I think I would give all of these a positive review. Everything below this, I would go mediocre to negative, but I would say 8 and up, I'm happy with these movies at least. My number 8 is Batman Begins, the first in the Nolan Batman trilogy. Now, this is a movie that I think it does its job. You know, it's a good Batman origin story. It's got some cool things. Yes, are there those classic stupid Nolan moments like the whole Batman's rule of not killing anybody, which is just kind of bullshit. Yes, people have talked about that to death. Is it maybe a little bit overly long? Does that non-linear story structure maybe get in the way a little bit? I don't know, maybe a little bit, not as much as like, the Odyssey. But Batman Begins, it's a solid movie. And I really don't have much to say about it because it's nothing crazy. It's just a good Batman movie. At number 7, I have Christopher Nolan's very first movie, and that is Following. This is a movie that I believe doesn't get enough love. If I were to say that about any movie on this list, I would say it's this. A lot of people haven't seen this movie because it's not as accessible. It's only an hour long. It's in black and white, and it has an extremely low budget. But the story of this movie and the way that he made it, and it's really cool. And I actually think that this is, as you can see, about midway through this list, a really good movie. It's one that I was kind of shocked by. I thought that I would be bored. I really wasn't. I think this movie actually has something to say, and I think that it says it. The characters, again, like classic Nolan style, they are a little bit flat. But I think it's a really cool movie that has cool things to say. However, I do think that very much like the Odyssey, the nonlinear story structure of this movie gets in the way of a version of the story that is better told linear. Sometimes Christopher Nolan, he loves nonlinear storytelling, and that's sometimes to the detriment of his movies because he just does it just to be cool, just because it's cool to have a story that's out of order. And I think that this movie, it just is confusing for confusing sakes because of that. And it's to this film's detriment. So if you haven't seen this movie, you should go and watch it. At number 6, this might be my hottest take ever because a lot of people have this as their number 1, but my number 6 is The Dark Knight. I know. So many people just clicked off. Either you clicked off or you're typing a hate comment right now. Go ahead, that's okay. But to me, The Dark Knight is the most overrated movie ever made. I've said that many a time. Does that mean it's a bad movie? No, of course. This is like a solid 7 out of 10, maybe an 8 if we're pushing it. But like, I think it's a movie that is entirely carried by Heath Ledger's performance. That performance is amazing. Is Joaquin Phoenix's performance as Joker maybe better? I think so. But that doesn't take away from how amazing Heath Ledger's performance in this is. It is transformative. I still cannot see Heath Ledger in this performance at all because it is just so good. And I even think that the stuff with Two-Face, while overshadowed by Joker, is kind of cool, interesting stuff. However, I just don't really think that Christian Bale is that good of a Batman. He's a decent Bruce Wayne, but it's been said before, his Batman voice is super goofy and really distracting. And there's just other really goofy moments like that, like when Batman falls off a skyscraper and he's just fine because he lands off a car. There's just stupid moments like that. It's kind of a stupid, goofy movie, and I think that it was graded on a curve because it's a superhero movie, and because it's a comic book movie, people expect less from it. And when it turns out to be an actual solid movie, people just glaze it a little too much in my mind, in my opinion. So yeah, it's solid. It just, I have never been able to understand the amount of praise this movie gets. According to Letterboxd, this is a top 25 movie of all time if you take the average rating. According to IMDb, this is the 5th best movie of all time or something like that. And to me, that is ridiculous. And I get that it's a good movie. If you said that this was the best Batman movie, I wouldn't argue. It probably is the best live-action Batman movie. I've never heard an argument where I'm like, oh, okay, that's why people say this is one of the greatest movies of all time, because it's just not. Nolanisms get in the way of his movies a lot, and I think that's true for this one too. And I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is the monologues, the narration, especially at the end of this movie, but just throughout. It will just directly just speak to the audience and say, this is what this means, this is what this is how you should feel, and this is what this character means, and we're just going to explain it in the most I'm 14 and this is deep way possible, instead of actually letting the movie speak for itself. And the dialogue in Christopher Nolan's movie is I think just consistently really bad because they put no trust into the audience at all, and it's just always over explaining. Um, and I think that this movie really suffers from that. So yeah, that's why The Dark Knight, solid movie, but it's just not that great to me. All right, number 5. This is a movie that used to be a top 3 movie on this list, but then I recently rewatched it and actually went down on my list. And that movie is The Prestige. This is a movie that is really, really cool, and I honestly believe has the highest highs of Christopher Nolan's entire career. And I think that is mostly because of these two main characters and the dynamic between them. I think that the idea of two magicians competing is a really, really cool idea. And the ideas of the pursuit of success and the sacrifices made to become the best of the best is that a little cliche? Like, we've seen it in Whiplash, we've seen it in Marty Supreme. But yeah, I still love it. It's one of those things that, like, if you do it well, I'm still going to eat it up. And I think this movie, for the most part, does that well. So it's got some good themes. It's got a good dynamic between these two characters. And for that reason, like, I do think that this is the highest highs of his career. And it also has some really great looking moments, great looking shots. However, I think that it's also a stupid movie. There are some points where I was rewatching this and I just laughed kind of at the stupidity of some of the moments in this movie. I'm going to have to get into spoilers with this because of the nature of this movie and because it relies very heavily on a twist in the ending. So I'm going to leave a timestamp right here. So if you haven't seen this movie, just go to this time. But until then, I will be spoiling this movie. What I have an issue with is them finding Hugh Jackman's doppelganger so quickly and so easily. And I think it would have been better if they literally found a person who looked a lot like Hugh Jackman, but instead they just have Hugh Jackman play both roles. And it takes you, that was the moment in this movie where I was just taken out immediately, because there's no way that you find somebody that looks that similar. Yes, they do his makeup a little bit to his nose to make him look slightly different, but it's just so stupid. And it also took me out to have this movie it suddenly become a sci-fi movie halfway through. Yes, they hint at the idea that there can be a teleportation machine, and they even introduce a real historical character in Nikola Tesla. And for them to just make it, oh yeah, no, like Nikola Tesla actually made a teleportation machine halfway through the movie, which is the first like fantastical or sci-fi element thrown in there, it's just like I kind of just can't take it seriously. It just takes me right out of the movie. And just the way that the twist is executed with Christian Bale being the twin, it's so obvious. And maybe I just said that because I've seen this movie before, but the character who is Christian Bale is disguised as his little like assistant, it's so stupid because this character without that twist is just shoehorned in there. He has no lines of dialogue, and he's always shot in a way where he's like in shadows, or you can only see the back of his head, or he's never like still on camera, so you can't make out that it's Christian Bale. And it just makes it really obvious that there is something to that character, and there is something behind that character, because he has no reason to be in the story besides to serve the twist, and he just is constantly a distraction because of how obvious it is that he's some mysterious figure. And so because it has some elements that are just forced in the story, the twist doesn't work as naturally as it should. And also, can I just say that Christian Bale's last words being abracadabra before he gets hung, I laughed out loud. I genuinely laughed out loud. That was goofy. And I'm sure Nolan was writing that like, oh, this is like the deepest thing. This is the deepest thing put to film. And he's like, abracadabra. And then it's so funny. It's so goofy. And it makes me sad that those flaws and a bunch of other like logic gaps are able to bring this movie down for me, because I genuinely think that this was really close to being an amazing movie, but it's just as it stands, it's just good. It has great things and it has really bad, stupid things, and it's good. It's a good movie. All right, at number 4, I have Oppenheimer. Now, this is a movie that also has some very high highs. This is a movie that is actually about something, and there's a lot of passion behind that and what this movie is about. And the ending of this movie is amazing. Like the final shot really sells this movie for me. It's a great ending. Is this movie a little bit self-indulgent with its length and with its nonlinear storytelling? Yes, and that's kind of what brings it down for me a little bit. But it's still a great movie. I don't think that it's quite worth all the glaze, and maybe the glaze of this movie brought it down for me a little bit, just like most of the movies on this list. But Oppenheimer is a great movie. At number 3, I have Inception. Now, even though it says high on this list, I would still consider this movie very overrated. But just like Oppenheimer, the ending is really what makes this movie for me. I like that this ending gives you something to think about, something to talk about when the movie's over, and it doesn't feel like it's spoon feeding the audience in that moment like many of Nolan's movies do. However, there are a lot of scenes in this movie where it's spoon feeding explanation. People have called this movie confusing. I don't know how this movie could possibly be confusing, because basically every other scene they're explaining the technology and over explaining themselves. And I also think that because this movie is so mathematical and so explainy, it kind of misses out on a lot of potential that this movie had going for it. People have compared this to the Japanese animated film Paprika, which is a very similar concept to Inception, and many people have said it's been ripped off. I don't really care, and I don't really think so. But even though I don't really love Paprika, I'm not the target audience for that. I still see that movie goes much bigger with its dreamlike qualities, because you literally you're able to do anything basically with dreams, and I think that this movie doesn't take full advantage of that. But you know what? It still has some cool moments. All right, number 2 on this list, I have Interstellar. Now, it is number 2 on this list. I have this at like a 4 or 4.5 on Letterboxd, and I'm about to probably give it its praise right now, but I would still say this is one of the most overrated movies of all time, and I would like to make that clear. And that, I guess it's not really a quality of the film, because it's not the movie's fault that it got the glaze that it did, but every Instagram reel that I see that's about movies, you look in the comments and Interstellar is mentioned. It is probably the most talked about movie for some reason in the film community, or like in the film bro community, I should say. And I just do not understand the glaze that this movie gets. I think it is in like maybe the third most favorited movie on Letterboxd, like the film with the most fans. This is up there, and that's just like, it's just crazy to me. Like, yes, it's a good movie. It is nowhere near the greatest movie ever made. With that said, it is a great movie. I think that this is probably Nolan's most emotional movie. Like, the 2 big crying scenes, the one where Matthew McConaughey cries, and then the one at the end with Matthew McConaughey and his daughter. It's genuinely emotional, and I think the first time I watched it, even though that was quite a few years ago, I remember getting very emotional and almost tearing up and crying myself, which I don't think any other Nolan movie is able to accomplish. So I got to give it credit for that. And is some of the dialogue too Nolan-y, too on the nose, too spoon-feedy? Absolutely. And I think that's a big flaw of this movie too. But it's still a great movie nonetheless. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a great movie. And at number 1, this is the only movie on this list where I would put it on like a list of my favorite movies. If we were to extend that list to like 50 or 100, this movie would get on there. And it's the only movie in Nolan's career that I would say this is like a masterpiece. This is his masterpiece. He peaked here. And because every movie that he makes, he gets more self-indulgent, I don't think he's going to be able to top this one unless he really rings it back. That is because my number 1 is Memento. This movie to me is genuinely brilliant. Nolan does a lot of weird things with his structure after this, and I think that is because Memento did it so well. He always goes with this weird nonlinear storytelling, but it works the best in Memento. The story could not have been told any other way, and the structure of this movie couldn't have fit a better movie than Memento. And it's one that doesn't need a bunch of exposition or over-explaining like many of Nolan's movies, because this movie, it just flows so naturally, and you're able to understand everything, and it's just the right amount of confusing. And it actually has, I think this movie has a lot to say. You get to the ending, my mind was blown, and I was just thinking about this movie for a while. Like, I think this is genuinely a movie where Nolan lands his themes the hardest and the best. Memento is my number 1. It's the best Nolan movie. And yeah, that's my video. So I guess this is the part where I give you guys some kind of sign-off phrase or outro.